I've been spending some of the time that many of we musicians and teachers have found ourselves enjoying by learning a door, cakewalk, and putting some tracks together. In the process of doing that, it's been quite a long learning curve which continues, I can assure you. I've been looking once again at MIDI to aid that process. What I've been doing is playing all the instruments as best I can, because, what else are you going to do, really? And drums are always an issue, because I can't play them. And also they're big things and they make a lot of noise and need many mics often. So I'm wondering about just using two sometimes, but anyway. For my purposes then, what I tend to do is obviously map the song out, intro, all the bars, so I've got the shape of it. And then often I'd put a guide keyboard with split bass down, because I've got to start with something. And the idea is to go through, and then maybe a guide vocal, go through and replace things. Now the drums are an issue. I would probably replace them with live drums, as there are people online that can do that these days. The last track I've just done, I went to a studio with a drummer in there and replaced them. I was there so I could explain what I wanted and conduct. But, that's quite expensive and time consuming. Well, fair enough. I wondered about a drum machine. My dissatisfaction with drum machines has always been that I've never found exactly the rhythm and the feel that I want. It comes pretty close. But close isn't good enough, because then I find that it poisons the whole track from the start. When I come to put the bass, I start going towards the drum machine rather than what I originally had in mind. So the whole track then is flavoured with that. And also this timing thing I've been talking about before with MIDI, I just find it a little bit unsettling. It's ruined the groove before I even start the thing. I thought to myself, maybe I could play the drums in, because the drums are only there for a guide, but the guide needs to be right in terms of feel, so that the stuff that I do with it, I feel, this is what I want, even if the drums are sparse or the sounds aren't right or whatever. It's more about the feel of it. The plan then is, once I've done all that, replaced various parts and built things up, and got it as good as I can, I could then take that or send that to a drummer, online drummer, and they could listen and they'd get a really good flavour, hopefully, of what I'm looking for in the drums. And they'd add their own things, of course, as well. But that's what I'm after. I'm after getting something, first of all, I can build the track on that's got the right feel for me. So all my playing is consistent with that. And then finally, when I send it away to a guy or a girl, they can hear that and think, oh yeah, that's what this guy's got in mind, including little pushes and little feel and that style of thing. And hopefully they can do their thing, and it's going to be, it's going to fit what I'm after. To that end then, I did another little experiment, because I'm going to work on this song now. I put down keyboard and bass, as you'll hear, and then, I'm used to the keyboard, I loaded up a MIDI drum kit. I did the bass drum and snare, and then went through it again and did a cymbal. I thought that'll probably do me for this purpose. So I went through doing that on the keyboard with a MIDI drum instrument loaded in the DAW. I'm used to the keyboard and the travel of it, but still, well, we'll see what you think. I thought, well, let me use my drum machine, and it's got rubber pads, and I'll play it. Maybe that would be better than a weighted keyboard. So then I went through it again and did it, as you'll see in the video, playing on the rubber pads on the drum machine. And then finally, I thought, I've got a conga here and I've got a cymbal, so let me try and make a bass drum and snare from the conga, and then go through with a cymbal and just play the thing acoustically, that would probably be good enough for the purpose. That's what I've done. See what you think. In the previous video about my concerns regarding MIDI and its musicality, I mentioned that maybe it would suit classical music, and somebody made a comment saying that as far as I thought I was putting classical music down there. I think they thought I didn't really understand it, which is true. I started off with classical music on very basic piano and then onto violin. And I thought about that. I thought, what did I mean by that? And I thought, I think what I meant was that music which is griddable, and the stave is a grid, and most of the classical music I came across, very early stuff, simple stuff, not early historically, but as a musician kind of things, it was presented to me on a grid, on a piece of paper it was a grid effectively, a MIDI grid. So I think that's what I meant. I think music which works well, related or even introduced on a grid, quantized on the grid, obviously you've got some freedom, that probably translates well to the grid of MIDI. Music which is not so easily presented on a grid. I've got a bit of a jazz background, and usually you get the chords and the time signature and what have you, and the rest of it isn't isn't griddable, isn't put on a grid, because it's partly because it changes all the time. It's your own interpretation, but nonetheless, I think it would almost be impossible. These slight movements and any number of velocity differences and things that you just can't make a grid fine enough. And if you did, it would be so nobody could read it. How many increments are there? So that's what I'm thinking. A music which is easily griddable will transfer to the grid of MIDI. A music which isn't easily griddable possibly doesn't work so well. Don't know. See what you think.